Hi everyone, my name's Rhiannon from Blue Door Board Games. Today I'm going to do another monthly wrap-up video of going through all the games that I played solo and a couple I played multiplayer in the month of May. Now May was a little bit of an off month for me. I played a lot of games as usual and I'm still carrying on with my aim to play a game every single day of the year, and I have succeeded with playing a game every day of the month. However, there was a little bit of a drop-off in playtime. Last month, in April, I played 64 hours. I only played 51 hours of games in May. I think part of the reason of that is a little bit of, I wouldn't say gaming fatigue, but just like general tiredness. I'm just feeling a bit like flat in life in general. So I think I've just sort of gravitated a little bit more towards video games. I've been playing a lot of Nintendo Switch just because it's a bit more of a cozy thing that I can just cuddle up on the sofa or bring it to bed and just play instead of sitting up at the gaming table and playing. So often that's what I've been doing. I've been playing like a board game and then I gravitate towards video games instead. But saying that, I think maybe that was also triggered by a certain game I had set up on the table and I wasn't as enthralled with it as I thought I was and used to be. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, we have played 51 hours of games in May, and that is across 14 different games. Now, some of these I have spoken about on the channel before, so I won't go into them in too much detail. However, if there's anything new to say about them, I will, and there's one in particular that I do want to speak about and elaborate on a little more because I have played it solo so much more than I have before. But without further ado, we will get straight into the list. Now, the first game on my list is a game that I can't quite believe I haven't even mentioned on my channel before, I don't think. It's the first game that I bought from a particular company. I saw it, I can't even remember, I think I just saw somebody post about it and the components literally blew me away with how unique and what quality they were. And I was instantly intrigued, and the look of the game as well is just absolutely stunning. I played this one 8 times over the month, over 11 hours. And that game is by Chip Theory, my first Chip Theory game, and that is Too Many Bones. Now, I've only got the lid here because it's a massive, massive, massive game. But look at how stunning that is on the interior as well. Absolutely gorgeous game. So Too Many Bones is a game that I play solo, but I play solo multi-handed, and that is my preference in how to play. You can play this like true solo. You have like a separate encounter deck because you go through like story cards which generate your scenarios, and they may end up in battles or decisions that you make. You can play true solo with its entirely different deck of cards. I find that a little less exciting than playing multi-handed, just because I love the way that the characters interact with each other. What you do is you play 1 to 4 gear locks, and that's the name of the characters in Too Many Bones, and they each have a unique set of skills. So you've got your base stats that you can train, like your health and your dexterity, your attack and your defense. But each gear lock has a set of skills that it can train, and they all act very uniquely. So for example, one gear lock may be very strong in applying effects to baddies, which are your monsters that you're battling against. So they may poison baddies, or they may do true damage, which ignores any shields that baddies have. Whereas other ones may be more defensive and heal other gear locks on the playmat at the time. So they all work in an entirely different way, and it's very exciting to get new gear locks and to learn their nuances. So when I play this game, I do tend to gravitate towards playing multi-handed, just on the basis because the gear locks interact so closely together a lot of the time that their skills really come to light once you are bouncing those skills off each other. When you're playing solo, you do miss that aspect of it. You're just essentially playing against yourself and really trying to like beef yourself up as much as possible. And I do feel like you are missing an aspect of the game which is otherwise there in multiplayer. Playing multi-handed though is really, really good fun. It is a challenge in terms of learning, because obviously it is a big game. Each gear lock has an entire double-sided sheet to sort of look at and goes through all of your skills, how all of their die work. Each gear lock as well has an innate ability, and they differ quite drastically. So one of them heals one every turn. Another one, for example, may be able to scout ahead and have a look through the upcoming baddies and see what you're up against in the next few battles. So in terms of learning this game, it is really a challenge. And when you are playing it solo, you have to make sure that you do have at least a base understanding of every single gearlock that you're playing. And that can be an obstacle to some people, but it is a game that is so versatile in how you play. So there's nothing stopping you from doing one encounter, for example, with one gearlock, and then just like resetting and then setting up your second gearlock once you've played through a little battle with your first gearlock, just to get an understanding of how they work. But once you've got that understanding of how each gearlock plays and how their stats and their die work, you can interlink them so well, and it just explodes in amazingness. So not only is the gameplay really fun in this one, but the component quality, without going into it too much, many of you may have heard of chip theory games, and their component quality is known in the industry as being some of the best. The components are all little poker chips, weighted poker chips as well, and all the mats are neoprene and really thick and hand stitched at the edges as well. It's absolutely gorgeous. All the artwork is lovely. The cards are all plastic, so you don't have any like thin like cardboard cards. They are all plastic, and it prides itself on being entirely waterproof. So you can play this one at the beach or in water. I would not recommend it because it would be gross and disgusting, but that's a selling point. You don't have to worry too much with water around the table with this game. Some people say that this game is quite swingy, and I do agree. There is definitely an aspect when you play solo, you can basically lose a battle in the first round, and that can feel quite challenging and quite downheartening. You just have to go into it knowing that that is the case, and also you need to really learn your gearlock and to really train your stats and expand your gearlock's skill set and learn how to really beef him up in that regard, and to prevent that happening in future. Now that's not always possible because you do get battles quite early on in your scenario, so it's just one of those things. And 2-player as well can be a little bit swingy. What happens is you have a set number of days that you work up. So on day 2, for example, the amount of baddies, the monsters that you face, is the number of gearlocks that you're playing in the game times your day number. So on day 4, if you're playing 2-player, that's 2 gearlocks times 2. So your baddie points is 4. That means you are drawing 4 one-point baddies. So that means there's only 4 maximum on the mat at one time. There's 2 gearlocks versus 4 baddies. And if all those 4 baddies are rolling or having initiatives that are higher than yours and they're going first, that means you potentially will have 4 attacks on you before you take your first turn. And so at that particular point, there's a little bottleneck I find in this game. So 2-player, day 1 is usually not a battle. Day 2 is where that is the crunch point. If you fail day 2, downhill slope from there. But if you get past day 2, get past day 3 and day 4, and then it opens out and you've managed to get over that big steep hill at the beginning, and you've beefed up your stats enough to sort of overcome those one-shot possibilities. I find the sweet spot in this game is at 3 to 4. So I usually, when I play solo, I play 3-handed, and that is where I find that it works really well. You've got a really great amount of interaction between all the gearlocks that you're playing. It's not overly complicated in terms of trying to juggle all 4 gearlocks at one time. You're juggling 3, but I find that once you know them, they do tend to run quite quickly. When you're playing 4, it's basically the same as playing 3, but the game is going to take longer because the amount of baddies that you are running through in the game, you get a queue of them. So there's only 4 on the mat at one time, but they then form a queue and then come in as you defeat them. The more gearlocks that you're playing, so when you're playing 4, that's the maximum amount of baddies you're going to be facing, and so it just takes that much longer. And I find that you can usually get to a point where you're probably going to win the battle unless something really bad happens. And I just don't really want to increase my playing time for no extra benefit, if you say. So the amount of replayability in this game is just off the table. It is outstanding. I mean, the amount of gearlocks that you can get, there's 4 in this base game alone. I have a lot of the extras as well. So I have Undertow, which is a separate standalone expansion, which is fully integratable with this one. That has an extra 2 gearlocks, and I have some other gearlocks outside of that. They can all sort of fit nicely in the 2 boxes, which is nice. I don't have the trove chest, which is the massive storage solution. But the amount of replayability that you have between all of those gear locks just alone is incredible. The amount of cards that you have to go through, you're not seeing the same encounters every time. Bar day 1 to 3, you do need an expansion to increase the variability of those ones. It's just an absolutely amazing game. And if you do have the money and you do have the time to put into it, and you're willing to like learn those gear locks and how they work, it is an outstanding experience. And even if you don't like it and you invest the money, people will buy this game off of you for pretty much retail price. So why would you not give it a go if you can? It is incredible, and I would highly recommend it to absolutely anyone. The next game on my list is another fast from a particular designer. This one I played 7 times over May, and I played for 8 hours, so just averaging just over an hour a play. And this game is another very heavy deluxe game, Kanban EV. Now this is a game, I can't even remember why I wanted to purchase this one. I think I was interested in Lacerda from a designing point of view. I heard that his was some of the like heavier, bigger, crunchier games that you could get from a Euro perspective. This one was very highly recommended from the solo community. The aesthetics of this game didn't appeal to me. I mean, it's beautiful, there's no doubt about it. It's very well designed and it looks sleek and very, very pretty, but it's just not the prettiness that I usually go for. I usually go for a much more natural, colourful, bright aesthetic, and this is very white, clinical, streamlined. And although it is gorgeous, it's not usually my cup of tea. And again, the theme of this game is like car manufacturing. And I have absolutely no interest in cars or manufacturing. So this one was a bit of a red herring. I bought it because I really wanted to get interested into Lacerda games. I wanted to try a Lacerda game, and this was one of the best Lacerda games to get into solo. So when I took this one out again this month, I basically had to relearn the entire game again. I think I maybe had not played it for 6 to 8 months, so you know that is quite a long period of time to go between playing games. But essentially I did not have really much recollection of how to play it at all. There are so many rules and so many little pieces to remember and little keywords, and the rulebook isn't amazing, and the player aids that you get just aren't that great either. So it was a challenge to get back to the table. It was a game that I set up, and basically I played my first game, and I recorded it as a play, but I wouldn't really count it as a play. It was a very slow slog through a first few turns, reading the rulebook after every single turn, being like, did I do that right? And how am I doing this next section? And for a game that I would say is not like a new game to me, it's definitely one that I played many times before, but just the length of time and the amount of rules that there are in the game, I just wanted to make sure I was doing it all correctly. It was, you know, it's difficult to get to the table, and it definitely didn't go off to a flying start this month. Saying that though, once you do sort of know what you're doing, it does get a lot faster and a lot easier. And I would still say that it is in desperate need of some sort of solo player aid, like an extensive one. And there is an absolutely brilliant looking solo player dashboard that I saw on Board Game Geek that I absolutely want to print off before I play this game again solo, because it just picks up all of the little bits that is nowhere to be seen on the board, nowhere to be seen on the rulebook, apart from if you look for this tiny little paragraph in some place where it's not really coherent of where to find it in the first place. But once you get over that initial aspect, that difficulty of learning it, that difficulty of getting it to the table, what a brain-burning, great experience this gives. What I really love in this game is the fact that you are playing against some like automated people. So they are blocking your spaces, they are getting in the way, they are taking the bits that you want, but you are also being assessed by a lady called Sandra, who is like following you around the board, or like going in a procedural direction, blocking spaces as well, but she's also assessing you. And that can be, you can change that to be a positive thing or a negative thing, depending on how difficult you want your game. First of all, I tried to do the positive one, just because I was still learning the game again, and it is quite a difficult game. So I tried that one first of all, and then I played with the negative Sandra. I didn't really feel that much of a difference between the nice Sandra and the nasty Sandra, if I'm totally honest. I feel that in the first 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds of the game, what she's doing is really, really crucial. She's taking points from you or giving you points. But essentially, once you sort of get over that hurdle, you don't really pay attention to what she's doing anymore. So I find this game a little bit of a funny one in terms of flow. It is so essential for you to do well in the first week of this game. And a week is like when Sandra goes from the top of the board to the bottom, going in each department once. What happens at the end of a week is that she assesses, and that's when the AI score points and you score points or not score points. Any points that the AI gain during the game get minused from yours. Also, a meeting may be triggered, and if we trigger meetings, that can score points and not score points. If you are on 0 or less points at the end of a meeting or at the end of a week, you instantly lose the game. So a lot of the time I find that the flow of this game is a little bit strange in that it is quite a challenge to get past those points. So once you get past the first week or the first meeting, you're like, whew, okay, I didn't get the sack, I'm still going. And that's great, but at that point I find the game to be a lot easier. At that point, you're then not worrying so much about what Sandra's doing, because you've got a little bit of something going on. You score points by gaining cars into your garage, but also by upgrading parts to that particular type of car. So by that point, if you haven't been sacked, you've managed to get a car and some upgraded pieces going. So you're going to be continuously scoring those at the end of every week, and you'll be having a lot more things to score in meetings. So I just find that the difficulty of this game is very much of like a hill climb. So like the first round, or even the first 2 rounds, I call it rounds, I mean weeks or meeting cycles, is just such an uphill climb. And then once you reach that peak and you've managed to stay in the game at one point, you're then on your way, and the rest of the game you can just continue to focus on what you want to do, gaining your cars and scoring as much points as possible. So I do feel like this one is a bit strange in terms of how it plays. It is quite unlike anything I've played before in terms of difficulty. Usually games may get easier as you go on, and this one certainly falls into that category, but this one just feels like such an uphill climb to even get to that point. It's a very odd feeling. Saying that though, I do have a lot of enjoyment in this game. If you can, I tend to play it that even if I get the sack in the first round or 2, I just continue playing and then just score at the end of the game, but just don't record it as a win. And then at least you're learning the game a little bit more, learning what you did wrong, and this is a big game to set up. So it's a bit disappointing when you get like 20 minutes into the game and then you've lost already. You don't want to pack it up, but also you may not have another hour and 20 minutes to like carry on with the game again or restart. So it can feel a bit disappointing sometimes, but if you just have that time to like continue that game, it's a much better experience. Another thing about this game that I find a bit strange is the scoring. So in the game you are scoring, I'm trying to remember now, I think you're scoring per upgrade that you've got per car in your garage. So for example, if you've got a blue car in one of your garages that you've managed to take, you are then scoring points per upgrade on blue cars. So you may have upgraded the body shell, you may have upgraded the battery or the engine. So if you've upgraded all 3 of those bits, you're scoring 3 points. And if you've got 2 blue cars, you're going to be scoring 6 points. At the end of the game though, the scoring of those parts is a little bit different. So you're scoring, I believe, per car, but the color car has a certain score value, and then you're scoring per upgrade. So if your upgrade of, say, your batteries has been upgraded, if batteries have been upgraded like twice in the game, you're scoring 2 points per battery upgrade you've got across the board, or something like that. So in the game, the scoring feels different for what your ultimate aim is as compared to what you're trying to score at the end of the game. And I find it very difficult, therefore, to like plan in the game as to what I'm trying to gain. Am I trying to like gain lots of upgrades on batteries no matter what car, therefore? Because that's already been upgraded like 5 times in the game, and so that's going to give me lots and lots of points at the end. Or am I trying to fill my garages? Or am I trying to... You've also got final scoring criteria as well. So am I trying to maximize those points? And there's so many things to think about in this game. It can be very overwhelming, but you know what you're getting into with this game. If you're looking at this game, you know you like heavy games, you know you like complicated games. So I don't really know why I'm saying any of these and shedding a negative light on them. I knew all of these things going in, just really trying to make sense of my overall thoughts on this game. So ultimately, this one really does benefit from multiple plays in a row, just so you can get really familiar with how everything scores, so you can then have a think about how you want to plan out your game. You can then start to be more concerned with what Sandra's doing and really follow what she's doing. And then also be worried about what the AI are also doing, because you need to be aware of where everyone's moving. What I really like about this game is the action selection and how the turn order works. So you've got all of your action spaces in a column, and you've got 2 different boxes on each sort of department that you've got. So for example, you've got the design department, they've got a top box and a bottom box, so 2 places that you can go. And the top box, you will go first because you are further towards the top of the board, but you actually have 2 shifts rather than 3 shifts to work. So basically that's 2 actions you can do in that department. Whereas if you took the 3 shift spot in the design department, you've got 3 actions, but you'll be going after the person that goes in the 2 shift box. So I just think that is absolutely fantastic. It's so simple. You can see exactly where the turn order's going. You can just see also with your AI, you know where they're potentially moving to. Sandra always goes in the column, so you know exactly what she's going to be doing next. And so you can really carefully plan out your turns and just take that little bit of a gamble, like, do I go for the top box and just take that hit on my shifts and my action points, or do I hope that they don't go there? And I love that aspect of it. And then the next round as well, the turn order is done by column again. So whoever is at the very top of the board will select their next action first and then proceed downwards. But then you're not obviously able to go where somebody else is at that particular time. So you may be going first, which is great. You get the first selection, but everything else might be already blocked. So it can get very frustrating, but it's so much fun to be able to work with that. And it's just the right amount of foresight, I think. It's a really good mixture of really pushing the boundaries in terms of do I risk like waiting out an extra turn to try and get that car that's come out, or do I go and nab it now because I think that Sandra's going to go and disturb it, and is very fun. And needless to say as well, the quality of this game is just outstanding. It's Eagle Griffin. Artwork is by Ian O'Toole. It's just a lovely, lovely production. The only thing I would say is the rulebook is well written. I just don't feel like the layout of it is very good for me. I find it very difficult to try and set it up when I'm playing solo. It's just not intuitive. There's a lot of little rules as well when you're playing solo that aren't actually written in the rules very explicitly or on a little player aid for you to remember. So for example, when you go up to when you manage to train past certain spaces in a department, so for example, I'm going to train in the design department, you then have a certain space that you tick up to. Once you've reached a certain point in the track, you are authorized in that department. And then you can also train further to get fully qualified in that department. So when you go into the authorized stage, there is something that happens. So the AI, I believe, scores some points, but nowhere does it say on the board, on your player aids, anywhere does it say how many points they earn. It doesn't say when they earn. It doesn't say what they do when they reach to the top of the board. And there's something that happens at each of those stages, and every single time I'm like, I think it's 2 points they earn, but I think it's 3 points they earn when they get to the top. It's just things like that you will forget if you're not overly familiar with the game, or if you are overly familiar and you just haven't read the rules in depth because it's in a tiny little paragraph hidden in the booklet somewhere. I just think that for a premium game of this caliber and quality and money that you're spending on it, they could have just put a very thorough solo player aid somewhere, just so you've got that easily accessible to you, because it's just those things that make the game slow down, and it's just another thing to try and remember when you're already fully immersed in trying to build your engine on your side. You don't need to think about what they're doing as, scoring potential. So that is Kanban EV. I really have a lot of fun with this game. I do really want to play it a lot more to get very, very much more familiar with it, because it's one of these games that the more you play it, the more you're going to get out of it. And I'm just touching the surface, I feel, with this one. So the next game on my list is one that I actually released a playthrough of very, very recently. It is a game that I played for 6 hours, 6 times, so about an hour a playthrough. And that is totally solo that I played it. And this one is Uwe Rosenberg's Fields of Arle. Now, I won't say too much about that, because if you wanted to see my final thoughts on this one, you can see it on my playthrough, which I will link down below. But this is one that it's a very funny one. This is actually the one that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. I think I just lost my mojo a little bit when this one was out on the table, because it just felt disjointed in how it played. So there were just things that I was doing. I just didn't have a plan. I couldn't see a through path. I was doing an action and thinking, I don't think that's the ultimate action that I could be doing right now, but I'm going to do it because I don't really know what else to do. And then it just felt a little bit unsatisfying at the end of the game, where I was just building this, building that. I'm not really sure if that's the best thing to do. Oh, I've got X amount of points. So this one just sort of left me feeling a little bit cold. However, in my playthrough of this one, I really, really had a good time. I really enjoyed the playthrough video I did of this one. And I think I ultimately just don't know what to think about it. And so I think sometimes I really enjoy it. If I'm not in the mood for it, I just don't enjoy it as much. So I think there's going to be, this one may or may not stay in my collection, but it's one that I do want to revisit at a later point in the next few months, especially as I'm diving into more Uwe Rosenberg games. I want to really understand what it is about this one that just didn't quite hit the mark. But I say it didn't hit the mark, but months ago when I played it, or a year or so ago, I really, really loved it so much that I kept thinking about it and bought my own copy. So I think maybe I just wasn't in the right frame of mind at the time. But in terms of solo and 2-player perspective games, this is a really good one, and especially if you're into farming themes, it is really, really fun. The only thing to be aware of from and where it falls down for me a little bit is it does feel disjointed, and there's not so much like setup variability, so you may feel like you're playing a similar game every time, because you are essentially, and just finding those actions that sort of link together a little bit more. I find myself carving out the same path game after game and not really exploring the game's full potential, and that is ultimately my fault. And so I think I do want to just sort of change up a little bit how I play this game the next time I get it out on the table. The next game on my list I will not talk about, because you can see my last month's video where I pretty much go on for about 20-25 minutes about this game. That is Frosthaven. I played that for 5 hours this month, 5 times. That is 2-player. I have not played it solo again as of yet, because all of our characters are not level 5. So we're still having lots of fun with that one from a multiplayer perspective. And actually Frosthaven is on the table right now, so in June I will probably be playing a lot smaller games or a lot quicker games that I can set up on the top of the table, because Frosthaven is snug under here and will probably stay there for a good few weeks or a couple of weeks. The next game on my list is one that, again, I've played for 5 hours. I've played it 5 times this month. I can't remember if I played it once or twice 2-player, but I've definitely played it a lot more solo this month than I have before, and it's one that I have talked about very briefly on this channel, but this is the one that I really wanted to revisit because I have so many more things to say about this game now. And this game is Genotype. So I have played this one on the easy mode initially. I think that's what I played last time when I spoke about it, and I wiped the floor with them. There was not much challenge there. It was fun just to learn the game. I've now played it on the standard difficulty, and that's what I've been playing like all the time this month, and I'm going to stick at that difficulty because, gosh, what a challenge. This solo mode is next to perfect for me. It is so well made. I am absolutely blown out the water and so impressed with how pristine it is. It's so good. Now, don't get me wrong, it does take a little bit of getting used to. You've got multiple stages, so they are doing something in every single round of the game. So when you're doing your action selection, as usual, you're drawing cards. they are going in your action spaces and blocking things off and taking resources and taking bean cards and various bits and pieces like that. They then have their own phase in the second bit, so they are going to be doing extra bits that you don't necessarily do. Then they are also going to be competing with you to take dice in the plant breeding phase, and then finally they're also going to be competing with you buying upgrades that you want. And because you are first player for the whole game, they get the first choice in all the upgrades. Ultimately, that means that this is a really, really challenging mode. They are gaining 3 coins on the standard difficulty every single round, so without fail they are always able to buy at least 1 upgrade. I've never had a game where we've all got so much money that we've pushed all of the upgrades to be too expensive. I don't think that could really happen unless you're really pushing for money. But it just means that it is so... They're just churning through the money. They are churning through all the beans that they can then harvest. They are getting all of these extra dice slots, getting extra plots, getting extra assistants. Where they don't use the assistant for their ability, that allows them to start validating traits on their pea plants a lot quicker. And although this solo mode does take a little bit of getting used to, as I said, it took me maybe 1 or 2 games to really sort of learn it, to be like, what does this do? What are they doing? And it does slow the game down a little bit, but it is so worth it. I say it's difficult, and I think it's just hitting the exact right difficulty level for me. Usually in a solo mode of the game, you can sort of play it a few times and then you get your win and you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty, satisfying. You may play it another time, oh, you've got another win, or you've just lost. You're always sort of pushing at, well, I am always pushing at that. I'm pretty much winning a lot of the time. I may make it a bit more difficult, but then that is a bit too difficult. So it always just felt pretty much on par with what my ability is. This one, however, I always feel like I haven't won against the standard difficulty yet, but I don't feel that it's actually too far off. I feel like every time I come back to the game and I'm like, okay, this is the time that I'm going to do it. What are they doing? I'm analysing what they're trying to do and what is on the board at the time, being like, how can I get the edge in this game? And it's quite exciting. It's actually made me come back and revisit this game more than I have ever done in any other game for a solo mode, just because of the difficulty is set right at that peak point, that it's always seems within my grasp, and it just finally just takes it from me at the last minute. So yeah, I've been thoroughly enjoying Genotype. The first time I played it, I was slightly underwhelmed, I think, but it's really shot up in my expectations. The production value of this game as well is just gorgeous. Every time I get it out, I just admire it. I just love it. There's even, went on a walk with my dog this morning and we went through a pea plant field and I could recognize all the plants because of the artwork on the cars. It's just lovely. Love it so much, and I would really highly recommend trying to get a copy if you like solo games. It's so good, and if you do find it too difficult, I don't think that it's too difficult to adjust the difficulty. You do have the easy setting. You may find that too easy, so maybe you could even, instead of them gaining 3 coins every round, they could gain 2 coins and see if that makes a difference. There's quite a lot of variability that I think you could do and adjust the difficulty with this one, so I just love it. Love Genotype. The next game on my list is a game that I have recently done a playthrough of on the channel, so I will link that one down below. I have played this one both multiplayer and solo this month. I've played this one 5 times over 4 hours. And this one, I will just talk about it very briefly. Heat pedal to the metal. Now, I cannot believe still that I am sort of raving and loving a game about racing, about cars, and I'm loving it from a solo perspective as well. Who knew that a racing game played solo would be so fun? But it really is. That the solo bot cars that come in this game are so well designed. They're so easy to run. They're so quick. You don't ever feel like you're slowed down. You always feel like you're racing, and they're just so competitive all the time, and they just manage to match your speed very, very well and get in your way, and it's just brilliant. I really have a really good time with this one. I haven't tried the tournament mode yet still. That is something that I really hope to do. Maybe next month when Frosthaven's back off the table, I will get that one tried out. I think my husband would like to play that one anyway in that mode, just to see how the sponsorship works. And he's not really played too much with the garage module yet, so explore that a little bit more. But there's so much content in this game. I think it is just so good, and I'm so glad I managed to pick up a copy, and really do remain quite impressed with how much content they actually managed to squeeze into this box. What with just the 4 maps as well as the modules that you can integrate with each other, and they're so easy to like integrate that you don't really need to learn any extra rules as such. There's just little extra bits to like add in as and when you want to, and yeah, it just makes for a very satisfying and fun experience. The next game on my list I will not talk about too much because I am going to do a full playthrough of this one very shortly. Well, I say very shortly, in the next few months. You know, time is of essence. I have played this one 5 times this month, all over 3 hours, so it is a fast game. And this is another Uwe Rosenberg game that I very recently acquired, Nusfjord. Now this one feels very different from his usual games. When you pick up a normal Uwe Rosenberg game, I expect like standard worker placement, around about an hour's play time, you know, a bit of animal farming, a bit of like crop farming maybe, and you sort of know what to expect. And this one does feel quite different in that it plays in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And it's also got a very different feel to it. So the stages of the game are a little bit different. So you start off by like issuing all your fishes. So this is where you get your haul in. So according to how many boats and vessels you've got at your disposal, depends on how many fishes you haul back in. And then from there, you then need to issue your fishes around according to what you've managed to get so far. So for example, if you've managed to like convince some elders to like help you out on your fishing schemes, you have to like give them some food. You then have to like issue some fishes to all your shares that are around, whether they're in your personal possession or if you've issued them out into the wider scheme of things. And so there's lots of little different niches in this game, and I definitely need to play it a lot more to sort of get a better understanding of exactly what sort of strategies should be employed in this game. Essentially, this one is all about buildings as well. So all the buildings are on cards. You've got 3 decks of cards in the base game. I believe you're supposed to start with the herring deck, and you've got 2 other decks of cards, and they all have different buildings on, all have different powers and interlinking abilities. So for example, if you build one, you may then gain 1 fish per boat you've already built or something like that, or it may decrease the cost of building boats in the future. So they all have interlinking abilities, and so I think that the replayability of this one is actually probably off the table. The amount of cards that you've got in this base game, and you know, they all come out a little bit differently each time, so seeing those links and how they interplay with each other can be really exciting. So I definitely want to play this one a lot more before I sort of go into my playthrough and my final thoughts of this one, but it's definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. The fact that it only plays in 20 minutes as well means that I can play it 3 times back to back in the same amount of time that I can most other standard games, and so that just gives it a little bit of a more interesting edge, I think. So definitely one to keep an eye on, and I will post my video of this one hopefully very soon, and I just need to sort of sort my final thoughts out of this one before I record that one. The next game on my list I have played for 4 hours, and that's 3 different playthroughs of this one. This is another big game. Oh, Tekhenu. Now this is one that I purchased, it was gifted to me actually. It was a birthday gift a couple of years ago, and this is one that hasn't been to the table for a few months, a bit like Kanban EV. And in terms of complexity and heaviness, I think this is nearing on par. Maybe not quite so interlinking complexity as the Lacerdas, but it's still a big heavy game. So when this one got out on the table as well, it was very much I had to basically relearn it a little bit. I could remember most of the rules, but in terms of relearning any sort of strategy, it definitely takes a game or 2 to really get going. What I really love about this game is the aesthetic nature of the game. So in the top left of the corner of the board, you have this gorgeous obelisk that is just looks amazing on the table. You are then rolling die, and the die, according to their color and where they sort of land in the obelisk's shadow, they may be pure dice, which are sort of like really positive. They're going to give you like positive balance in your scales before you assess at the end of the round. They may be tainted, which they're going to give you like negative, they're going to counteract that positiveness that you get from the pure die, or you may have forbidden dice that you can't draw. At the end of every couple of rounds, you're going to be rotating that obelisk, and the sun is going to simulate the sun moving around this obelisk, basically. And any dice that have not been drawn, again, they then change in terms of whether they're tainted, pure, or forbidden. And I absolutely love that mechanism. It's so unique. It's never something I've seen before in a game, and it just is really quite cool in terms of planning, because you can then see exactly what dice are going to be available to you in the next round, in the next 2 rounds, 3 rounds. And if you're clever enough, I'm absolutely not, but if you're clever enough to really plan ahead, I think that this game could be a lot more enjoyable. Obviously, the AI is going to take die away from you, so you may not be able to plan that sufficiently, but there's definitely that element of planning if you like that in a game. I do find this one is a little bit dry from a solo perspective. There is a Board Game Geek solo mode that I have played before. I didn't play it this month, and I wish I had a bit more time with this game to get that mode back to the table, because that sort of simulates a player in a different way, and you can integrate multiple players. So you could play a 4-player game of this just by the 3 bots running them simultaneously. And I find that becomes a much more competitive and much more interesting experience, especially when it comes to the temple complex, because you are building pillars in the temple and you're scoring points according to how many buildings are around those pillars, or you're placing the buildings and that's scoring points to how many pillars are in that column and things like that. So if you've got more people competing for those spaces in that temple complex, it gets a lot more interesting. And when you're playing solo against the bot, that doesn't really become a problem. There's a couple of spaces that you really want to sort of get, and they may get it before you, but ultimately there's just not too much competitiveness happening. There's not too much competition. Saying that though, the solo mode does run pretty well. It is complicated, so once again, a bit like Kanban EV, I needed to go and print off a solo player aid. There isn't really a good solo player aid in the game at all, so and the actions that they're doing are very slightly different to what you're doing, and there's a bit of decision making to be done in terms of what die they're drawing, and then if there's not a point to go in that space, they do something else instead. So I definitely needed that player aid to be printed off to get this back to the table and make it an enjoyable experience. Otherwise you just got your nose in the rule book the whole time, and I really don't like doing that too much. So it is complicated. There's so much going on in this game, but it is a really fun experience. I particularly found it quite satisfying this time round when you're basically using resources in this game. You've got 5 different types of resources. So you've got your like granite and your marble, you've got paper or papyrus, and bread. You got bread, and you can gain those resources by doing various actions in the game, but you can also gain them by producing resources by selecting a particular die of that associated colour. Now, I found it particularly interesting in this game that I managed to get through an entire game without actually taking a die with the sole intention of producing resources from it, because that can be a little bit of a waste unless you have maximised the potential of that action. There's various ways of doing that in the game. So I thought that was quite an interesting part of the game where I haven't managed to do before. So this one aesthetically is quite dry. It's very beige, like very, very beige. That does sort of, make it quite thematic in terms of very deserty and very dry and very hot feeling. But it just looks a little bit, I would say, naff. It looks a little bit muted and very subtle. And although that does fit with the sort of theme of the game, it doesn't pop on the table. The only thing that pops is the obelisk in the corner, because the obelisk does look really, really good. But in terms of gameplay, I think I want to play this one a little bit more, and I do want to explore that other solo mode a little bit more. But it doesn't have that like wow factor that other games may have. But it is still a good experience, and it is quite challenging. It is very much of a different ebb and flow. So you're scoring in 2 separate rounds. You've got an in-game scoring round, and you've got an end-game scoring round. So you're scoring little bits in the game, but most of your scoring points are going to be during those particular bits. I'm not really sure if I like that aspect of it. I mean, on one hand, it's quite satisfying to see you sort of shoot past the AI at those particular time points. But also, it sort of feels like when you're playing the game and you're not really scoring any points at all in the next round and the next round and the next round, it can feel a little bit like unsatisfying. So yeah, I'm not really sure if I like that scoring aspect or not, but yeah, it's a fun game, and it's actually really cheap when you compare it to a lot of other Euro games. So from that perspective, it's definitely worth a shot, and I'm glad I've got it in my collection and I've tried it out because it's a fun one. So the next games on my list, you can see here, these ones have all been mentioned before on my channel, so I will not go into them very much. But we've got Ganz, Schon, which I have played twice over 41 minutes. Really having a lot of fun with this one still. It's a really, really cute, short, fun game. At the Gates of Loyang as well, another Uwe Rosenberg game. I will not talk about that one too much because I will be doing a solo playthrough of that one as part of my series, and I will be discussing my thoughts on that one in more detail. The next is Three Sisters. 42 minutes. I played that one once. That one is 2-player that I played this month though. That was a lot of fun 2-player. It really doesn't play too differently to the solo mode. It's very much like a multiplayer solitaire type game. There's a little bit of, you know, because when you're playing solo, you're playing against Farmer Edith, who's going to be taking Dai away from you anyway. So it really doesn't play that differently. But it's a lot of fun, and the more you play it, the more you sort of recognize what bonuses that you can get and really sort of dig into the shed actions a little bit deeper, just to like unearth some really high scoring potentials. So that's a really lot of fun to get further into. And the Bloody Inn I played once solo, 23 minutes. So these are the ones that I've talked about much more on my channel, so I won't talk about those anymore. So the next game on my list is not one that I'm going to be talking about right now. That is a game that I played 2-player over 53 minutes. That is Hoplomachus Remastered, and the reason why I'm not going to be talking about that one right now is because that was a bit more of a relearning game, because I played that one initially when I received it from the Kickstarter towards the beginning of the year, and I just have not had the time to get that back out and really dive into it, because there is just so much content there, and it is a great game that I think deserves a really in-depth discussion, and a game that I think deserves a lot more than 53 minutes of learning time or relearning time. In addition, it was 2-player, and I just wasn't in the mood to sort of relearn a game at that particular time, so my thoughts on that one are a little bit like, oh, I wasn't into it right then, so I won't talk about it anymore. But that is in my collection. It's another chip theory game I own. I've also got the Hoplomachus Victorum, and I will absolutely be talking about that one at some point at a later date when I manage to really get the time and the hours into that game. I've already got a lot of hours in that game already, but I don't feel like I've even scratched the surface. There's just so much there. But that's all I'll say about that one today. We've got one more game on my list. I played that one solo. That is over 38 minutes, and it is the final part of the campaign mode that I have played in this one. And this is actually a game that I started the Blue Dog Board Games channel with. It was my first ever solo playthrough that I did. And this was with my Kickstarter, because I was very excited about the receipt of the Kickstarter. Call to Adventure Epic Origins. Now this was a bit of a surprise to me in that I've never played a Call to Adventure game before. I didn't really know what to expect. You know, I saw a little bit of the gameplay. I knew it was a bit more of like a character builder rather than like an in-depth game, but I didn't really quite know what to expect. And I think, honestly, you need to readjust your expectations, or I needed to readjust my expectations of this game. And I think some other people may do too, after hearing some, you know, thoughts on the game online and some comments that I've personally had. So this game is not particularly complex or deep on any level. You are essentially collating some story cards or some traits which may manipulate your stats in some way, and then throwing some runes, assessing their outcome, and then you may be able to gain an extra card into your like character builder So the only decisions that you're really making in the game are to do with what card you are selecting to work towards, and then from that card whether you're going to go towards the top action or the bottom action, and that is determined again by what coloured runes you're going to gain from finishing or completing that objective. So for example, your objective might be, say the card is like a picture of a treasure vault, and you've got your top action, which would be to break into the treasure vault and steal the treasure, or the bottom action may be to protect the treasure against some potential thieves that are coming in. And then you decide on that ultimate path by the runes that you're going to get. And so if you take the top action, you may get 1 green rune and 1 blue rune. And that will just increase your strength as the game goes on, because the baddie or the ultimate villain that you're going up against will have 2 coloured runes that you need to collate in the game to then be able to attack him with at the end of the game. So the amount of decisions in the game are very few and far between. That is what I struggled with at first. I thought I was getting much more gain than I ultimately received. But I've made my peace with that now. Ultimately, this is a character builder. This is a story builder, and you need to completely immerse yourself in that aspect of it and not expect too much from it in terms of story or world or campaign building or any sort of exciting ultimate battle, because that's not what you're going to get in this game. What you are going to get though is a game with absolutely beautiful artwork, some really fun story building, especially if you get into the character. You're going to get some really nice components because the runes that you throw are so fun. Some people moaned about the runes and said that they wish they just had dice, and I think the runes were one of the selling points of this game to me. I think they're so fun to like pick up all your runes and give them a shake and they just chuck them on the table. It's so unique, and no other game that I know has runes in as opposed to dice. At the end of the game, once you've either beat or not beat the baddie, I actually had my first failure the other day as well. Like, this game is really super easy, and that's okay because ultimately it's not a very challenging, heavy decision crunchy game. It's a character building game, and so I didn't mind that it was too easy. But it was just so lovely at the end of the game to sort of look at your display of cards and then run through in your mind like what sort of character you've built, what their traits are, what experiences they've had, and really build up that story in your mind. And I can imagine that if I've played D&D before, and if I ever played D&D again, I would play this game to really flesh out my character and really, because I'm not imaginative in the slightest, but I would really dive into this and just build the character that I want, because it's just a really, really fun experience from that perspective. But yeah, in terms of gameplay perspective, this one is very simple, and there's not too much depth to it. But as long as you know that going in, and you are looking for a pleasant, lightweight experience that's going to give you something to talk about after and have a lot of fun with, especially when you're playing with other people and sharing your stories and the decisions that your character is making, it's a lot of fun. And I've finished the campaign now, which means I've unlocked all the cards, and just looking at all the artwork on them is very lovely. I loved taking my time with this game. I played it outside this month because it was lovely weather. Just watching the art, like looking at the artwork whilst in the garden, was just a lovely, really fun experience. So that is it for my list today, and that is all the games that I played in the month of May. Let me know down below if you have played any of the games on my list and what you think of them in the comments below. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on some of the big, heavier games as well. And also, in terms of Lacertas, I'm also wanting to maybe expand my horizons in that regards at some point. What are your favourite Lacerta games? From a solo perspective, obviously. But yeah, so I'm hoping that June will pick up a little bit in terms of gaming for me. I'm still very heavily into my Nintendo Switch at the moment. I have not been playing Tears of the Kingdom, but I really do want to play that at some point as well, so that will just sap more hours. But actually, I'm finding it's quite a nice balance to have the board gaming aspect as well as the video gaming aspect. They're really bouncing off each other, and I'm really having a great time. So I don't mind that I'm not putting as many hours as I otherwise have been before into solo gaming. I'm still gaming every day, and I hope to continue. As I said, Frosthaven is now on the table this month anyway. I'm filming this in June and it's now on the table. It will be for a couple of weeks, so Next month you will see hopefully some more smaller box games, some more print and plays perhaps, and we may talk about some other games that we've visited before because I don't have to relearn them. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the list and have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye.